Okay. Hi, I'm Michael Mikowski. I'm the president and CEO of JINSA. I'm honored to have with us today Ambassador Elliot Abrams, who's a senior fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations and has held a host of senior positions in the U.S. government and national security at the National Security Council, Deputy National Security Advisor, Special Envoy to Iran and Venezuela, I think in the first Trump administration, and a little farther back, Assistant Secretary for Latin American Affairs at State.
Yep.
Is that all right? Among many others, but just known, of course, certainly here in Washington is one of the leading wise men. Um, one of the leading wise men here on in foreign policy, respected by both sides of the aisle. Before we proceed, I guess I should say, because it's just such big news here in the United States, but we want to express our condolences, deep condolences to Charlie Cook's family, his wife, his kids, his extended family. I'm sure many of you have been reading about this. I personally didn't know him or follow him well, but everything I read, it sounded like he was an amazing young man and did an amazing amount by the age of 31, and also was a great patriot and a great friend of Israel. Isn't that right, Elliot?
It is. I did not know Charlie Kirk either, but it's extraordinary what he achieved by the age of 31, and certainly a real loss to the pro-Israel community in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu texted condolences very quickly. You're seeing a number of Jewish leaders say things. I had a text from someone I hadn't been in touch with. He's not a Jewish leader, but he just wrote about his interactions with Charlie Cook
Hmm.
and how positive he was. And this guy is actually the guy I know is not necessarily a good constructive person, but he's a little difficult. And he said, and this guy said that Charlie Cook was always so nice and responsive, and it's really it's very impressive, and it's a tremendous loss. So obviously, we hope they got to find obviously the assailant, and but I guess this might be a segue, Elliot, to talk about a different form of terrorism. That's terrorism in the United States. I want to talk to you about Qatar and this attack that Israel executed. And I'll just say a few quick things, and I'd like to get your thoughts. But I mean, the last I was looking and reading things, it's unclear. Some people were killed. It's unclear how many were killed.
Hmm.
There are questions whether the United States did they tip off the Qataris in time for that to happen. My sense was that Trump knew about this, not from the military, but that he had understood this maybe even before. I mean, I want to get your thoughts, Ellie. I want to just start here because it seems, before we talk about the implications of this,
Hmm.
what's happened, but it defies logic to me that the United States would do an attack like this without some, consultation, or at least well, maybe consultation, at least informing someone senior in the United States government.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, it's
Well, there's a lot of logic to that,
yeah,
partly because uh, Qatar is, for reasons that are unfathomable to me, a major non-NATO ally, was given that
well, we'll talk
status in
about
the Biden administration. But and we have Al Udeid there. We have a large air base there. And one of the things you have to think about is the nature of the Israeli attack and whether people at Al Udeid might think, is this an Iranian attack on the base? What's going on here? So there's a lot of logic to the idea that there would be prior information from the Israelis. On the other hand, think of it this way: the Israelis tell the U.S. government, "Hey, on that date, at that time, we're going to attack um, people, Hamas terrorists in Qatar." What do the Americans do with that information? You sit on it, and then the Qataris say, "What? You didn't tell us?" Do you pass it on in the knowledge that the Qataris are likely to pick up the phone and instantly warn the terrorists? You have to worry about leaks, even if it is not the U.S. policy to tell the Qataris. It may leak to them anyway. So I think it's complicated. Um, the old expression, seek forgiveness rather than permission.
Right.
And I don't know the facts. That is, I don't know what the government of Israel said to the American government and when. Um, and there are various stories. I mean, one story that's been around a lot in the last few days is um, the Qataris were informed, but by the time they were informed, the bombs were going off. Maybe. I think we don't know. And it's convenient, let's be honest. It's convenient for the United States to say we didn't know anything about this. And if we'd known about it, we wouldn't have let it happen. That makes the Qataris and maybe some other people feel better. I do think on balance, it's pretty gutsy for the Israelis to do this without even telling the Americans, maybe, without the details sometimes, just saying, you should know that we don't view those Hamas guys in Doha as immune, and we're going to go after them. You just need to know that. You don't want to know the time and date, but you just need to know that. Um, that's my guess, but again, we don't know.
Well, let me ask this. So let's get into this a little bit. It seems like you and I were just at this meat conference. I talked to some Israelis who are, I'd say, on the center left. They supported it. Um, I think there was no question in most in it, that the Israelis were going to go after these people. There was a question of where and when was the only
Yeah.
issue, but they were going to go after them just like they went after everyone involved in the Munich Olympics terrorist attack of 1972, where they would kill or eliminate, to use maybe the professional parlance, these neutralize people in Europe. It wasn't just in
Yep.
Qatar. I mean, in Europe, where Israel had a
Yep.
lot of close ties. So why not do it in Qatar? I guess is in
I we it's September 11th.
yeah, that's right.
We have to think back to the change in the United States after September 11th. There were huge changes. Uh, for example, we created the Department of Homeland Security and the post of Homeland Security Advisor to the President. We changed the FBI. No more going after bank robbers. It became a counterterrorism organization. We invaded two countries, Afghanistan and Iraq, because we said we're not tolerating this. This will never be permitted to happen again. The Israelis have said, the Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday, I think, October 7th, 2023 was their 9/11. What does it mean? It means that, okay, you got to start thinking about things differently. Um, we're not negotiating with terrorists. When we can reach them, we will eliminate them. And that's the Israeli post October 7th view. If you criticize what was done, then you have to say that these key leaders of Hamas, terrorist murderers, have achieved immunity because they're in Doha.
Yeah.
Because they sit in Qatar, they're safe forever. Now, I don't understand why that would be the case. I mean, we should get into the whole question of Qatar and its role in this, but the notion that there's geographical immunity, it seems to me, is one that we've never adopted in the U.S. and the Israelis, as you say, have never adopted. Um, their enemies attempt to kill Jews everywhere. They've attempted it with, unfortunately, great success in Argentina, we remember. The Israelis are constantly dealing with Iranian efforts to blow up embassies and kill Jews in Europe
Yeah.
and all over the Middle East as well. So um, the notion again that the Israelis have to kind of disarm and say, well, Doha is a safe place for murderers, it does
Yeah.
not seem to me persuasive.
Yeah. It does seem to let's mention about I guess there is questions of timing before that we get into Qatar. I
Right.
guess there are questions. Was this a thought that this could help with the hostage negotiations? Because the Israelis, some Israelis have said, well, those some of those that they were targeting were obstacles. Like it's hard to believe that they're even bigger hardliners than Hamas, but that these guys were a challenge to getting a deal done. Some of them, I think, had more ties to Iran. It was said was just so. Was this to help the hostage thing, or was it also, or both? They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. That this was a operational opportunity where you had a bunch of these guys congregating, and therefore they decided to
Yeah,
attack. So it was just
I
an
think
op.
this was.
Yeah,
Uh, I think this was the equivalent of the strike in Beirut that killed Nasrallah. That is, you have a target you want to get,
yeah,
and now you have information, or
yeah,
you think you do, of where those targets are going to be. So it's an opportunity to do it. Now, those who argue, yeah, but the timing is terrible, are suggesting, I guess, this is going to kill the negotiation, or at least going to delay it for a long time.
or kill some
It's a,
hostages. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable, obviously, question to ask. But first, I'd say we've watched now for nearly 2 years these negotiations, and we've seen that when you ask the question, why so slow? One of the answers is, well, the Hamas guys in Doha have to refer everything to Gaza because the people making the real decisions are in Gaza. They can't agree to anything in Doha anyway. They're not on the ground. They're not controlling the militant, the terrorist troops inside Gaza. And those guys are still there. Whoever was there a week ago is still there. So I question, for one thing, whether the people who were killed were able to negotiate, or maybe they weren't killed. I guess we'll find out. But people who were attacked were really able to negotiate, able and willing to negotiate a deal. I think that's an assumption that people make. Um, as to whether this means, well, now there's nobody who can do this negotiating, I think that's false too. First, Qatar said immediately, now we're still in this. I mean, they're middlemen here because it serves their interests, and they're not going to stop now. But a more important point, I think, is what about Egypt? There have
yeah,
been two middlemen. There's been Qatar and there's been Egypt.
yeah,
As between the two, I think we in the United States should have much greater confidence in the Egyptians. They're there. It's their border, first. Second, they oppose rather than supporting and financing the Muslim Brotherhood.
yeah. They hate him.
They know who Hamas is. Yeah. So I'd much rather have the Egyptians as
Yeah,
negotiators.
I agree. Let me interrupt. I usually wait to Q&A at the end that we take, but Jay Salman, the Free Press, has written two questions that I want to ask you, Elliot, that's relevant to what you were just talking about. First question was a legal question. He says, I'm just reading it. Says the DOJ has indicted 6 members of Hamas for October 7th, many of whom live openly in Qatar. Why on earth hasn't the U.S. demanded the extradition of these men? They're wanted for murdering Americans. The second question he has: do you think the Qatar attack will kill or roll back the Abraham Accords? But
Well, let's just turn to that because I think the answer is no on the Abraham Accords.
yeah,
I don't think it's that
yeah,
complicated. And you've seen, for example, from the Emirates, condemnation, and Mohammed bin Zayed is I think today visiting Qatar to express his condolences or whatever, but not a word about you know um,
yeah.
ending the Abraham Accords. So I'm not concerned about that. And as always,
And we know how much the Emiratis like the Qataris and the Saudis.
well, that
Yeah,
right. I mean, you take all this at face value? I don't think so.
yeah,
And uh, you know the they want a relationship with a strong Israel, not a weak Israel. That's another part of this. Jay's first question gets at this whole issue of U.S.-Qatar relations. Why don't we demand that they turn them over? Why don't we demand that terrorists, murderers be prosecuted? Why don't we make all these demands of Qatar? Well, I think the Qataris personally, have figured out a really successful game. They pose as neutral. We just want peace. We're right in the middle of this. We're negotiating. And we want to help negotiate. That's all we're doing. But it's not true because they support the Muslim Brotherhood everywhere. They fund it everywhere. That's the ideology of the regime. And we don't seem to be paying any attention to this fact. Why not? Well, I'll sum it up in one word, Mike: money.
Yeah, right.
Money. I mean, we used to think that the Saudis, I'm talking 25, 30 years ago, spent a lot of money on a lobby in Washington. This was child's play compared to what Qatar is doing. And, I think everybody watching this knows the amount of money put into American universities, the amount of money spent on lobbying in Washington. It's just astonishing. When I speak to groups, I sometimes start by saying, am I the only person in this room who's not on the Qatari payroll? Because it's a big payroll.
Yeah.
Lots of former officials, law firms, NGOs, think tanks. I mean, there's a lot of money being spread around. And this donation of a plane to the United States for the use of the president is a classic example of this. So I think you got a lot of people here saying, "Oh, we like them; they're very cooperative. Don't rock the boat." And so they continue to get away with what it seems to me is a pose, and it's the reason that there were such bad relations with their neighbors for a number of years, including the Emiratis and the Saudis, because they oppose the Muslim Brotherhood and Qatar supports it.
Yeah. I mean, that's by the way, you could add, I'm sure that with this administration, you have some current administration officials who had financial relationships with the Qataris, either as an agent, I think like the Attorney General, or Witkoff, who I think had a real estate. I think the Qataris bought a building of his.
Yeah.
Some of the sons of Witkoff and Trump are in business, I think, with Qataris. Even Jared Kushner, I think, is their Qatari investment. So there's a lot. This has shown, I think, this attack also shines an unpleasant light, because whenever you shine a light on Qatar, there's a lot of unpleasantness. There's the money that you talk about. Then there's what you were also talking about, which is the rabid anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-Semitism of this government, and Al Jazeera, which is a powerful station in the Middle East, which is based in Qatar. And
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we pay nearly enough attention to Al Jazeera. I mean, during the Gulf War, I'm talking 20 years ago, it was the view of the then Vice President and Secretary of Defense that they were costing American lives. They were inciting Iraqis to kill Americans. If you look at it more recently, example, if you ask, polls tell us that the great majority of Arabs in the Middle East don't believe what happened on October 7th. Don't believe the brutality, the rapes, the murders. Why not? Well, one great reason is Al Jazeera, which has never informed them of it, and instead is carrying on this great anti-Israel and to a substantial degree anti-American propaganda campaign. And that station is, owned and run by the regime in Qatar. So they're getting away with an awful lot. And I think Jay Solomon's question is a good one. There are people there who should be brought to justice by the United States. And I mean, it's not just a question to ask of the Trump administration, it's a question to ask of the Biden administration, too. They keep getting away with it.
Another thing besides why they right. So they've been supporting Hamas, other Sunni terrorist organizations. There's Al Jazeera. If I recall correctly, they blamed October 7th on Israel, their initial statement, if I'm not mistaken. But then also something I think there's not a full understanding here in Washington about is also about El Udeid, the airbase. One of the reason people think, and the Qataris are very smart and they've tried to be very useful, and it's for their own interest in the United States. I give them credit actually how shrewd they've been.
Hmm.
But one of the things is El Udeid. People think we need that base. It's a very fancy base. Costs a lot of money. Air Force guys, they all love that base. The thing is, I'll just mention something, and folks watching could look on our website about this. General Frank McKenzie, who's a previous CENTCOM commander, is a distinguished fellow with us, and he wrote a paper last September reimagining our basing, our force posture in the region. And one of his comments was that this is last September, a year ago. He said that basically we have these bases, they're kind of relics of the Cold War, but if the main issue is Iran, which McKenzie thought so, General McKenzie thought so, then we have to rethink some of this. And he says El Udeid in a conflict with Iran would be a liability, and we should reduce our assets there, and we should think of other bases in the region, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and so on. And what happened in June in the 12-day war? Of the 10,000 troops that we have in El Udeid, we took out all but like 50. We evacuated our airplanes. If this base was so important, how come we evacuated almost virtually the whole base?
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be better understood here. And
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think at first I agree with you that the way all of this has been handled for, I don't know, a decade here at least by the government of Qatar is very shrewd, very smart.
yeah,
You have to give credit where it's due. I mean, they've played us like a fiddle.
yeah,
Um, if you look at the geography of Al Udeid, it's too close to Iran, as you were saying, and it's too far from Asia. You would, if you think about it, you'd be better off from both points of view having a base in, say, southwestern Saudi Arabia.
yeah.
It would just make more sense. The Qataris have made this essentially free for us, which is very smart on their behalf. And obviously, from many points of view, the Air Force just loves it. And one can understand why. Um, but it has not proved as useful in the crunch as people would hope.
Yeah. So it's something that Jins is going to be working on even more about this basing issue. And
I can tell you that there were points during the Iraq War, I'm talking again 20 years ago, and more recently, where I and others have said, let's put some pressure on the Qataris about moving the base, and the Pentagon has been completely against it.
right.
Even the idea of, well, okay, let's announce a study of alternative basing possibilities. Pentagon completely against it.
Yeah.
But it is something that I mean, I'm glad Jins is doing it, and I wish the U.S. government would do it just as a thought experiment, because there are reasons to argue that a different location would be better for the United States.
Um, let's also talk about implications and just for a few minutes about Gaza also.
Yeah,
We brought it up, but so we don't know. Time will tell. Well, this will help a deal or not help a deal. By the way, I should add, I forgot to mention this, but it is important. I should note that aside that some soldiers got killed in Gaza the other day, you also had 6 civilians in Jerusalem that were killed in a shooting at a bus stop, I think, and Hamas took credit for it. I don't know if that has anything to do with the timing of this, but it offers a little context. 4 soldiers in Gaza and 6 civilians. It's a lot of Israeli deaths in recent days. So I don't know if it's connected, but I just bring that up. But let me ask you on the um, implications. You mentioned Egypt, for instance. Well, maybe the talk should shift to there, and that may be a better, as you point out. Do you you mentioned the MBZ, the Emirati leader going there. I think MBS, did he go, or is
It
going?
might be today, it might be tomorrow, but yeah,
Yeah,
he'll
right.
go too.
Yeah, he's going too. And we all know they don't like the Qataris, but they're all part of the GCC, and they have to show some, I guess, solidarity.
Right.
It's but and we know there's no hypocrisy in the Middle East, so we know it's really sincere. But I guess what other, there's some tension. It looks like a little bit with Israel. Netanyahu spoke to Trump on this. What do you see? Any other implications of this strike that took a lot of people by surprise?
Well, first on the United States, I think it's unclear. We have a record now, President Trump's first term, but even from just this term, of cases where there are a lot of stories in the press that, he had a terrible meeting with this person or that person. He's very angry at this person or that person. He loves this one or that one. And they're often inaccurate. So I don't know what to make of stories that say, well, he's very mad at Prime Minister Netanyahu or some other people in the administration uh, are. I just don't know. Partly because, we said this about MBZ and MBS. It's obviously useful to them to posture by going to Doha and expressing solidarity. What's in their bottom of their heart? Who knows? We know what the track record is. Um, I thought the president's Truth Social statement was interesting. He did not condemn what the Israelis had done. He said he was unhappy with it. He wished it hadn't happened. Um, but on the other hand, killing terrorists is a worthy goal, uh, which may well actually reflect his mind about this. That is, he's of two minds about it, as I think a lot of people are, about the location, about the timing. Um, you know, uh, we also don't know the outcome. And I imagine he'd be a lot happier about it if it succeeded than if it failed. So if the question is, well, what's the long-term impact on the relationship between the US and Israel? I can't see how it will have one. I don't even know that it will affect the Gaza negotiations, but the fundamentals of relations between the US and Israel are broad and deep. And if the president concludes, well, Netanyahu shouldn't have done this, he'll tell him you shouldn't have done this, but it doesn't change the overall relationship.
Let me ask you one last thing on Doha, and then I do want to ask you about Gaza. Um, Turkey, I made a reference to that. If you're the Turks, so Turkey is unlike Qatar, it's actually an actual ally of the United States, doesn't always act like one. Uh, it also supports the Muslim Brotherhood. They have Hamas leaders that go to Turkey that stay there sometime. How do you think? And Erdogan and the Israeli relations have been awful since October 7th, and I think he made noise I don't know, a month ago or something about how Israel's going to attack Turkey. But I don't know. How do you think the Turks might be thinking about this, seeing this?
Um, it will make them wonder, of course, whether it's possible that Hamas people in Turkey would be attacked. Now, there is a big difference, and we should be upfront about it. Qatar can't attack back. Turkey
Yeah,
can.
right.
So you really, if you're an Israeli, if you're the prime minister or the minister of defense or the IDF chief of staff, you have to think about that. What will Turkey do in response? I would think that if Israel has decided we're going to go after all these guys, then it becomes a question of how.
Yeah,
Um, in the case of Turkey, for example, you may want to do the kind of assassination that's been done in Iran,
right.
um, rather than a bomb or
Airstrike.
missile attack
Yeah.
from the air. Yeah, that would be my sense of it.
Get the Mossad involved, which apparently, according to reports, was not involved in this. Or they at least they let it known that it's not, maybe because they don't think it's been successful. I don't.
Well, that was a bad report in one way.
Yeah.
Uh, in our own government, when you start seeing a news story that says the FBI said we didn't do it, CIA did, and DOD says we had not, all of those are bad stories because people are leaking against each other when they
Yeah.
should be on the same team. And that's true in Israel. And I thought it was really bad that you saw people, for example, I mean, presumably from Mossad, saying, we had nothing to do with this. If I were the prime minister, that's what I'd be saying to David Barnea, the head of Mossad. Knock this off.
Yeah. By the way, I'll add on the other side, there've been a number of leaks over the recent, I'd say, last year on certain things, the beeper issue and a few other things where things have leaked out that about the Mossad, some of their accomplishments, because somebody in the Mossad seems intent on letting people know about some of the cool things they've done that had big impact. Yeah.
Understandable from a human point of view
Yeah.
and understandable from a bureaucratic point of view,
Yeah.
but a mistake.
Yeah. Let me ask you, and we on this subject, and we'll conclude with this one, but is Gaza, how you see, so Israel now, I think, controls 75% of Gaza, 40% of Gaza City as of a few days ago or something. They've moved a couple, at least a couple 100,000 people, it seems like, towards Mawasi. They
Yeah.
got more to go. You've had talking about leaks and stuff. It seems like, based on reports, that Eyal Zamir, the chief of staff of the IDF, is, you know, and he's no softy. I know that on personal things. He's very tough on Gaza, but he doesn't agree with the approach of the government on Gaza and then the hostages. Um, where do you, where do you, where
Yeah.
are we on this? Where are we going?
You know, I tend on this to be more analytical than to be telling the Israelis what to do, because I think there are no good answers.
Yeah,
It's not this is great and this is terrible. Um, I certainly understand the views of hostage family members who worry um, about anything other than getting a deal to get the hostages out now. Um, I also understand the point of view of the minority of hostage families who think the best way to get our family members out is to defeat Hamas, and we should go at it all the way. As you've just said, there are differing opinions in the kind of security structure there, or at least there appear to be. So I would say, as an American, I'm not going to say what I think they should be doing, and presumably they have more information than we do too. It's a terrible, terrible situation and has been since October 7th. Uh, I, I get what the prime minister is doing in two senses. One, Hamas has been very reluctant to reach a deal and to let any hostages go. How do you make them less reluctant? How do you pressure them militarily? That's how. And that's what Israel is doing in the hope that a deal is more likely. Hasn't happened yet. Maybe it happens tomorrow. And then we'll say, well, this idea was right of preparing, not announcing that won't do it, but of preparing and then beginning going into Gaza City. Um, in the end, they may have to go in, and what they will be doing is further weakening Hamas in its last stronghold. And that's a good basis for any um, future of Gaza, because any future of Gaza depends on killing Hamas. I don't mean killing every single individual in it, obviously, but really killing the organization, not only as a military organization, but as a terrorist organization. Um, so we don't, we Americans, we don't get to balance those equities and make the decision. Israelis whose lives are on the line do, and the government has made the decision.
Yeah. And of course you have, which we all have everyone read about, all these reservists who have done so much reserve duty, and there's a lot of fatigue in Israel about this. But you know,
It's true. The only thing I'd say about that, it's absolutely true. And you know, and I know, and have family members who've been in this situation of being in Gaza for 300 days, for 350 days. But remember that this is, in fact, a national army, it's a citizens' army. The people making the decisions also have friends and relatives who are in Gaza. It's not, it's not a distant expeditionary war. It's right there, and it involves all of them and all of their families, which is why I think, I don't want to say this is right and that's wrong.
Hmm. I have one last question. We'll conclude, I guess, is um, let's see, I'm just looking. Oh, we do have a couple questions. Maybe I'll ask then. The it Elliot, you or we, Jinsa partnered with the Vandenberg
Right?
uh, coalition, and the which you chair as one of your hats, and John Hanna, my colleague, he chaired this project. Jonathan Rui, and also another colleague. We, them, and some other folk, a few other, some other experts, Scooter, Libby, and so on. You guys put out an early, well, we put out
Yeah.
together
Yeah.
in early 24,
Yep.
the end of February, if I'm not mistaken. So
A
almost,
year and a half.
yeah, a year and a half ago, about 5 months or so after October 7th, a day after project that took the, I know that could be a whole nother webinar, but one of the things that's interesting is why it took the Israelis so long to create this. And I encourage everybody to go on our website or Vandenberg Coalition to look this up and some of the recommendations, because I think it did influence at least the Israeli thinking. We took them a while to try to create this mechanism to get the aid out of,
Yeah.
delivered outside of Hamas/UN channels. I don't know why it took the Israelis that long on that one, and that seems kind of. I mean, you guys wrote about it. The team wrote about it already in early 2024 with recommendations on how to do this and to separate Gaza, Hamas out of this. But I mean, among the many issues that Israel has to face is you want to undercut Hamas as in this case as being in charge of the aid.
It's
Um,
very striking.
yeah.
Um, you know, some things appear to be unthinkable. You just can't do them, right? For example, the notion that the UN won't be in charge of food for Gaza. Well, it's impossible, right? I mean, how can you? And the whole world is against it. They want the UN. So it took a long time after October 7th for the Israelis to get to that point of saying, this is nuts. We can't allow this continue. Um, the UN itself acknowledges that 85% of the food that goes in through UN channels doesn't get to the people it's meant for, civilians in Gaza. It gets to Hamas. And it's true that the UN as an organization and all its parts, the World Food Program, UNICEF, everybody, um, and above all, UNRWA, resisted this idea. What do you mean you're going to create an alternative channel? We're in charge of this. They understood that it was, in a sense, a death blow to UNRWA. So it took the Israelis a long time, actually, to get this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation up and going. And I think one could say that in the beginning, it was not well run. That is, it was maybe it's unfair to criticize because nobody had ever done this before, but it took a while for them to get the distribution right and to get the security right. And they now have, and they're delivering millions of meals against the protests of the UN and largely without the cooperation of the UN. But it's the right thing to do. And it's a critical thing to do because as long as Hamas is in charge of food in Gaza, it obviously has its hands around the throat of every civilian there. So this is whatever you think should happen in Gaza the day after, a critical part of it is being able to guarantee food supplies, medicine supplies that are completely out of the hands of Hamas. Israel may have taken too long to get to that point, but they're there now. And I think it's fair to say the United States is supporting them in this, and nobody else is. I can't name another government that is
Yeah.
actually supporting them.
Yeah. By the way, I don't want to. We have a few more, but I mean, we had, of course, we had Steve Price, we had Gary, we had a Rob Deneen, we had a few. We had a
Right? We had Gary Ginsburg.
Gary
It was a great
Ginsburg.
group.
Great group. It was a terrific group. And I thought, and the group had briefed the senior Israeli folks twice, U.S. senior U.S. officials, Arab officials. I think the Israelis were the most receptive, but there is the. But let me just. Well, I keep saying we're going to conclude, but there are just a couple more questions. So then we'll definitely conclude.
Okay.
Yeah. What do they say? Okay. Um, One is Jay Solomon had a follow up. By the way, he says, couldn't the U.S. or DOJ, Department of Justice, be legally liable for not trying to prosecute these Hamas leaders? They're indicted for killing Americans, not Israelis.
I think the answer to that's no.
Okay.
That is, that you can't sue the government for a prosecutorial decision like that.
Okay. Charlie Kupchin, blast from the past. Great to hear from Charlie. Asks, can you say more about the U.S. role? CENTCOM must have been informed in advance since Israel was flying into airspace controlled by the U.S. Is it credible that Trump did not know in advance?
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, I've asked myself, I have no inside information on this. How would Israel have done this? And the answer is they'd have flown over Iraq. And the United States is pretty much in control of Iraqi airspace too. So if you see planes making that route, uh, it's hard to believe that CENTCOM didn't detect this immediately. Now, if they had no information, they may have thought it was an attack on Iran.
Mm.
But either way, it's odd. I mean, they would have notified Washington. That would have happened automatically. I mean, it'd be interesting to know who knew when, and
Yeah.
when did somebody notify
Yeah.
the president? At what point did they go to the Israelis, maybe at CENTCOM, and say, hey, what's up? What is this? Um, but again, the Israelis may have thought the later we Americans know, the easier it's going to be for us, actually.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, thank you very much, Elliot.
You're welcome, as
Great as
always.
always. And I forgot to mention actually your most esteemed position you had, which was you're a member of Jinsa's Iran task force. So we love working with you in any capacity, whether it's about Gaza or Iran or anything. Thank you very much for joining. Thanks everybody for joining. We're all going to be interested to hear as we learn more. As Elliot said, who knew what when, and and obviously we'll keep following these stories. Please stay tuned. And
Thanks,
just
Mike.
wish everyone a good rest of your day, good rest of the week. And again, we send our deep sympathies to Charlie Cook's family. All right, thank you
Thank you.
very much. Bye.
Bye.